because sometimes you listen to respond and sometimes you listen to understand.
Welcome to the Sporting Mindset Show. Our chat today is with cricket coach Paolo Franzoni. We discuss the art of coaching people as opposed to skills and drills. We delve into curiosity and how Paolo is working on listening to understand and not just to hear, and how as coaches we should always be wanting to learn. Please enjoy. Paolo, thank you for joining us today.
It's only a pleasure.
Nicknames, have you had any? Do you have one?
No, as I said, it's a bit boring because some call me coach. I guess that's an easy one. It's not really a nickname as such. It's just what you do as a person. My son calls me the coach. I don't know why, but I coached him all of his career. So the coach, and I did have one guy who called me guru, which I thought was a bit out there. But yeah, no real nicknames. I guess when we came to Australia in 2003, I realized that if you abbreviate a name and add an O, that's usually a nickname, like a Richo or a Tomo. But when your name ends in an O, Paolo, can't really add another O. So, no real
Paolo.
Oh, that would be, yeah, Baloo. Yeah, Paolo. Maybe.
Even the use of the coach, has that influenced how you've seen yourself? People say, oh, coach, it almost reinforces what you do for your business.
It does, but it also gives it meaning. I think coach in general, especially over in America, it means something different. Like there's a coach is looked upon as a really real job, if you want to call it that. It's not just a part-time thing. It's a job and it's respected. Whereas in most countries, coach is just something that you do. But I think it does. It reinforces that. It makes you realize that you are making a difference, that you are helping people out. And to me, that's what a coach is. It's about being able to help others achieve their goals and dreams, I guess.
And so how long have you been coaching?
Since we got to Australia. So prior to that, we came from Zimbabwe. We arrived here in 2003. The usual story, kid wants to play sport, no coaches. As a parent, you put your hand up. And then it started becoming more of a passion from there. So 2003 is when it started, coaching kids, and then started getting one-on-one sessions. So we started doing private sessions because part of your team said, do you mind giving my son a bit more extra? And then from that, I decided, well, it's always been a passion, cricket. It's always been a passion for me. So started doing some courses, did the WACA courses, the Cricket Australia courses, started doing a little bit further up the ladder. And yeah, just kept going since. No complaints there. It's been good.
And so with the courses, and this is one of the things that I discuss with people, and especially probably back in those days, did you feel a lot of it was about just getting an accreditation, going through the process and learning about cricket, as opposed to the coaching skill of being able to relate to the players and actually get inside their head to get the best out of them mentally?
In the cricket world, yes, the level ones and level twos is all about technical stuff. So it's more about how to hit a ball, how to coach certain things, what are they expecting at the next level. The level 3 course wasn't. It was more facilitating. It was more how do you become a coach at the highest level. So the level 3 is the highest level that we can get here, and it's about coaching either state or international teams. So it's more about how do you facilitate those people? How do you help them out? What do you need to do? More on the coaching side of things rather than the technical side. So it wasn't how to play a cover drive or how do you pick up the ball. It's more about how do we facilitate? How do we help people? How does empathy play a part in the modern game? And being able to, obviously the team cultures and those sort of things that went along with it. So the higher you went up the ladder, the less technical and tactical stuff there was, and the more coaching there was. But I've been very lucky to have you as a bit of a sounding board. You and I have had a few really good chats. And I think it's important to have that critical friend who, and you helped me out with my level 3 by having a look at my videos and telling me what you thought, because not being a cricket coach, you didn't look at that aspect. You just looked at me as how do I portray myself to the players and do they get my message across and how do I do it? The same thing, I worked with a coach in Canada called Francois Rodrigue. He's a professor at, I think it's Ontario, and professor of kinesiology. Is that the right word? I never know how to pronounce it.
Kinesiology?
That's the one, kinesiology. So, working with people like you and him, where cricket is not even a consideration, but it's about the coaching. It's about how do you coach people? How do you get the best out of those people? That to me was where I think the most interesting part is we all know how to hit a ball, or we can teach people how to hit a ball, but can you get the best out of people? That's different.
Very broad question, this one. How do you get the best out of people? What would be the first step in getting the best out of somebody?
Understanding them. I think getting to know the person and the player. To me, it's first the person and then the player.
And so how would you do that on a daily basis? You go to train somebody week in, week out.
Yeah.
What steps are you taking to really get to know them?
If it's a first session with someone, the first thing I do, I never coach. I never train them. I just throw balls. And I'll look at what they do, and then I'll ask questions. So I'll say to them, "Oh, that was okay shot, but could you have done anything different? Or why did you play that shot? Or how did you come up with that? Or what decision did you make to get to there?" So by understanding that, and then in between that, asking about their personal life. Have you got any kids? How do you go to school? Got a dog? What other interests do you have? Because being able to relate to them makes it a lot easier to have discussions at a later stage. So you've got to build that up, like everything. You can't build a relationship in 45 minutes. It's never going to happen. But if you can start sowing those seeds, and you would know from coaching, some kids just don't open up in the first 2 or 3 sessions. They just clam up and that's it. But if you just keep asking questions and they're a little bit more open than just yes or no's, then they start opening up. And then the next week you can say to them, "How's your dog?" Or, "You said you had an exam this week. How'd it go?" All of a sudden it's no longer cricket related, but it's personal.
And are you able to, do you need to write those notes down to remember them for later on? Or are you one of these people that actually almost puts them in a trap in your head and says, "I can bring this out next week. I can bring it out in a month's time. I can bring it out in a year's time because I remember"?
You're going to start showing my age here now. I used to be able to remember them all, but I'm not too bad yet. But I think it's going to get to the stage where I do at the end of every session. So if I've got 4 or 5 sessions in the day, I'll sit in the car and I'll put little notes on my phone. So it'll be, what did I do with the player? Did they show anything? Sometimes it's even emotionally. How did they react to certain situations? Are they in the right frame of mind? They might not be. But I put all that down and then reflect on that on the way home. And then the next session, I'll bring out the notes and say to them, "Okay, you struggled in that one. How did you go this week? Emotionally, you weren't that great." But yeah, I've started taking notes because I'm afraid my memory is getting a little bit short.
Like us all. And like in terms of, you said you might recognize something emotionally with them in the session. Do you work with that, or do you ask questions about that in the session, or do you say, "Okay, I'm just going to let them themselves work through that"? Or do you try to change how their mindset is in session, or do you deal with it after?
No, I try in session. I do try in session because at the end of the day, if someone's really down and about, going through 45 minutes of it, if you can notice that in the first 10 minutes of the session that they're really struggling, if you can make either a comment or put things into perspective for them, sometimes there's not the end of the world for those players, but it seems to be. So if you can put that into perspective and then say to them, "Well, we can get a bit more out of the session, I'll try that." There's sometimes where some players just don't react or don't respond to your, and that's okay too. You can't change the world in everybody, but if you can have a chat to them and say, "What's going on?" I'm very open with players. I had an opportunity where I was working with the ladies at Melville. My dog passed away. So I wasn't really in a great frame of mind, but I'd go to training and say to the girls, "Listen, girls, if I'm a bit ratty today, it's not because of you. I'm just had a bit of an emotion with this. I'm over." So I find that being open with your emotions is okay. And then they understand where you are at. So I'd like the same with a player with me. If a player is struggling that day, I'd like them to come to me and say, "I've had a tough day." And then we try and make the session maybe lighter. Instead of just being a hard slog, we might add some fun elements in there and try and see if we can change that mindset. Because at the end of the day, sport's supposed to be fun. And it's not supposed to be hard work. If it is, yeah, I'm not sure.
And like in terms of, like you talk about, it's meant to be fun. Is that something that you would hold true as part of your philosophy across the board, regardless of whether you're working with a national player or whether you're working with an academy player or just a club player? Is it the same principle as part of your philosophy, fun?
Yes, they've got to have fun. It's the degree or the deliberate practice that you put into it, isn't it? So, if you've got a 6-year-old, everything's fun. You don't teach them how to play cover. You don't tell them where the elbow needs to be. You just give them some tasks to do. And then when you're working with a districts player, that's slightly different because you've got an end goal there. They've got to try and perform. So there's times like at community level where performance is not, it's important, but it's not the end of the world. And therefore, what you want to do is make sure that they come back and play cricket next year. If they don't, then you haven't done your job as a coach because you haven't retained them. But when you're getting to the districts or the states or the international level, there has to be a performance element and they have to be driven towards that. And that's where a lot of motivation comes into play, your intrinsic motivation for the player. But I think no matter what it is, even when we work with the state players, your fielding drills are fun. There's none of this mundane, throw a ball out, pick it up and throw it back. There has to be a bit of fun. There's got to be a bit of competition. You've got to get players having a bit of banter. You've got to get them to go into each other so that the session doesn't seem like hard work. It's like everything. If you incorporate running into your drills, fitness is not it's not hard work. It's fun. So you've got to try and add that into it. But as you go up the levels, we have to adapt what you do so that the players are still getting the challenge or the deliberate practice they require to be able to perform at that level.
And with that deliberate practice, a good segue into it, how much focus do you put into your preparation around actual deliberate practice? Or is it, okay, I'm going to work out this drill, there's going to be a fun element, there's going to be a competitive element, and you leave the purposeful practice part up to the players? Or is there a strategy that you might use to get real purpose out of their practice?
I feel that there's different stages. So in preseason, I'm very dictatorial in terms of what the players need to be able to do. So it's not driven by the player as much, but they need to tick off boxes before the start of the season. So there's certain fundamentals, whether it be batting, bowling, or fielding, that are just fundamental. They're basics, and if you do them really well, you've got a foundation to be able to progress your game. So I work really hard on those foundations, and they're sort of dictated. So I'll plan your program for today. We'll work on that. If there's anything that we need to do again, following session or to follow up on that, we will. Otherwise, we progress along until we get to a stage where in October you're ready to go. Ball one, you're the best prepared that you can. In season is different. There I work with players. So in season, I think it's about what do you require right now? Okay, you've done all the hard work, you've done all the basics. What is it that you need to do to be able to perform now? So it may be struggle mentally. I thought my fear of failure was there, or it may be I just can't time the ball, whatever the case is. And a lot of it is just psychologically. It's nothing physically. They can do it, but it's just put under pressure, they struggle a bit. So then in season, you then tailor it to their needs, I think, at the end of the day. But I'm very structured in what I do. Yeah, I've got plans. I do plans. And when we do group sessions, it's the same thing. It's like, what happened in the game before? What do we need to work on this week to ensure that we're better next week? And you just plan it. Sometimes you do have to go ad hoc. Sometimes it's just, it doesn't work. As coaches, we all have these plans and ideas, but as long as you've got enough of a base that you know that you can adapt your session to still get an end result, I think that works.
If you look back to 2003, 2004, when you first started, do you look back as a coach then and what you can do now in terms of being able to be flexible enough to be ad hoc when you need to be? Is there a distinct difference between the two coaches, you at 2003 and you now?
Oh, huge.
What are the big differences?
I was a parent. I was a parent who was just basically minding a group of kids. That's what it was, wasn't
Child
it?
minding.
That's it. Yeah, exactly right. There was nobody else who put their hand up. And yes, I had some cricketing experience. That was good. But you're herding 6-year-olds. You're basically just looking after 6-year-olds, teaching them how to throw, how to catch. I don't think my aspirations of doing what I'm doing right now were there at that stage. We just came to Australia, finding jobs, finding a house, finding a life. Very grateful for what Australia's given us over the years. But yeah, just wasn't in my head that I was going to be a coach. I was an IT specialist for many, many, many years and did it here for many years as well. But yeah, I guess it didn't really cross my mind. It's only it sparked that interest. It sparked my interest back into cricket and that passion that I had. And then that just obviously one thing leads to another. And as I said, you started off with one kid, then you started with 6 kids, and now you've got 100 kids a season plus some teams that you work with. And yeah, it's totally different in terms of that. Having done all my courses as well, it's enlightening you as a coach. You're always learning, aren't you? As a coach, you never stop learning, from day to day. And what you can learn from surprising sources.
Do you think, is that something you're consciously aware of, or do you just think it's ingrained in your personality that you just want to learn? Is there some coaches whose egos won't let them learn? I like that response.
Yeah, very, very much. I mean, ego plays a big part of it, doesn't it? It's about having that fixed or growth mindset. I think any coach that tells you that he knows it all, they're not right. Sorry for the coaches out there, but you don't know it all. And the key is to be able to rebound or use people to not so much validate what you do, but find other ways, because not everybody's the same. And one thing I say to the kids or the people that I work with is that it's not wrong, it's just different. So there's ways of doing it. You have to find a way around that way for some people. I'm very fortunate that I work with a very diverse range. So I work with players of all abilities, some 10-year-olds, some state players. I work with players with intellectual disabilities. I work with the vision and blind impaired Australian players. So having that huge array of players, you have to learn to adapt. You have to learn to yeah, someone with intellectual disabilities can't reason the same way as somebody else. So you have to find a way of being able to coach, and adapting your way of coaching comes with through learning, and you learn from them because if they can't do something, they'll tell you, and then you'll say, okay, well, maybe we've got to find a different way of doing it. And I think that's being curious, whether it be a player or a coach or anything in life. Being curious is important. If you're not curious, you'll never find out, or you'll just be stuck in your bubble. So be curious. I think if there's one thing you want to take away from it, is be curious and learn.
I get the impression that you're very curious in the way you coach because you're forever wanting to improve and get better and ask questions. Once again, is that something that you've developed over time, or have you always, as a kid, did you ask questions? You want to know a lot?
We did. I did want to know a lot. We were very lucky I guess when we were at school, I was fortunate that I played first team cricket from a young age. So I managed to get into the squad really early, and we had a deputy headmaster there, Clive Barnes, who, amazing man. His cricket knowledge, maybe, I hope he's listening or anything, but his cricket knowledge was good, but it wasn't exceptional. But what he did really well was he asked questions. So, as I said, I was very fortunate that from a young age I was in the first team and was in the leadership group from a year after. So he used to position himself at square leg on his shooting stick, and he used to put me right next to him. And as ball goes dead, he'd ask me questions. He wouldn't suggest anything, but he'd just say to me, "What do you think of that ball? Or, do you think this ball is the right play against that? Or, if you had a different way of setting the field, what would you do?" And he sort of, without knowing it, I mean, I became captain, and he was sort of grooming me in that way. But just that asking of questions made me seek answers. And by seeking answers meant I wanted to learn more and more about what I did and how I go about it. So learning has always been a part. Being in IT, you always have to learn, I guess. So that's always been inbred in me. But from a cricket perspective, I don't know. You just always want to learn and get better, because if you can't get better, then you can't improve the players.
If you hadn't spent the time at square leg with him, having him model that behaviour, do you think you would be as curious?
No, I think you really, and that's where, we talk about questioning as a coach, how we question players, because we can say, was that a good shot? And you say, yes. Well, is there understanding in that? There's no understanding. But the way he did it, and he said, and he made you think about the answers, he said to him, oh, do you reckon that was the right ball to bowl? And you think to myself, oh, that was short and didn't have a square leg, and whatever the case is, and you think, well, maybe not. And he just asked questions. And for me, that's where that curiosity came about. And if I wasn't there, most probably wouldn't know. I think I've always been looking to learn, but maybe not to that extent.
So the modelling by another coach has obviously had an
Yeah.
impact on you. So do you then now, when you coach, you're obviously quite aware about, if I ask really good questions, I'm going to be able to entice thinking out of this player, and they're going to get better faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And questioning is the key. But one thing that I've had to learn to get better at is listening. So it's one thing asking the question, but then it's another response from the player, because sometimes you listen to respond and sometimes you listen to understand. And if you're listening to response, you've already got the answer in your hand. You don't really care what the player's saying. You're just saying, hurry up and finish so I can tell you what you need to do. Whereas if you listen to the player and understand what they're saying, you can then modify a response around it. It might not be what you had in mind, but I think that's where you get the importance of helping players. It's not about, yes, you've got the knowledge. As a coach, you must really got the knowledge, and that's great. But it's understanding the player and then tailoring that response to them rather than the other way. So questioning has to come with listening.
Yep. And once again, and is that something you're conscious about? Do you, when you're listening to a player give you an answer, are you in a way in your head going, what is he actually saying here? What's going on in the background? Is that something you're conscious about, or have you got to the stage where you just feel so natural with it that you're always looking for that next deeper question?
No, I think that's one area that I'm still working on, is listening. Because, as I said, I think until possibly 4 or 5 years ago, I was quick to respond. I hardly even finished the question. I was already looking to respond. And you learn that that's not possibly the best way of getting players to understand their game or get better. So it's an area that I've worked on extremely hard. It is getting better. So I'm at the stage now where I think I'm not prepared with the response straight away. I'm asking the question and then just waiting to see what they have to say. And sometimes that silence, I mean, you and I have had a chat about, silence is not necessarily wrong. If you can wait a minute or 2 minutes for them to think about and process it and then answer you, that's okay. You don't have to prompt the answer. You don't have to ask. Give the player time. You've given them a question that they're not prepared for. Give them time. So silence sometimes is not a bad thing. But yeah, I'm getting better at listening, and listening to understand, I think, is the key.
And do you think the listening to understand comes from recognizing the body language as well? So do you find that you are able to assess where a player is at without them actually within that silence? You can see something going on with their body or their reaction or how they're going about holding themselves. Does that tell you a bigger picture?
Yeah, and also, as we spoke about understanding the player, I think, if it's the first few sessions, you're not going to get the answers out of them, and you understand that. So that silence could go on forever. So you do have to maybe tailor your question slightly differently. But as you get to know the player and you understand, as you talk about, the body language of the player or what they're doing at that particular moment, then yeah, sure. But I think you've got to understand at what level and how well do you know that player to be able to get the responses they, or not the responses you want, but the responses that they need to give you to be able to improve their game. So yeah, it's getting to know that player first before you can get to that stage, I think.
Are you completely open-minded with the type of player you work with, or do you tend to get to know them and then categorize them in a certain way and have a set of strategies for that particular player? So, there might be the really cocky, really confident, arrogant sort of player, and you go, okay, well, I've dealt with this before. I know I'll go down this sort of line. Or you've got that really shy, withdrawn, introverted player, and you go, have you got strategies that you deal with this type of players? Have you got to that stage yet where you've got almost like little pathways that you'll go down based on what you're seeing the player do?
Yes, and then that comes with experience. The more you deal with players of different character, I guess, if you want to call it, the more you understand how, not so much to deal with them, but how to approach them or how to get the best out of those players. You spoke about the arrogant, cocky ones. Sometimes it's about putting them back in their box and saying, well, you're not as good as you think you are. But that comes from being honest and understanding the relationship that you have with the player. If you're honest with them and they know that you've got their best interest at heart, they'll take that on board. If they see it as criticism instead of feedback, then they're going to be very resistant in terms of how you approach that conversation. So I think with experience, you get to understand different characters, how you've dealt with them in the past. Sometimes you would have done it the wrong way. You must really approach it in the totally wrong way and got a wrong response. But through experience, you learn how to deal with that. I still think you've got to deal on a case-by-case basis. Everybody's an individual and different.
Is there ever, as you said before, it's not wrong, it's different. Is there ever a wrong way? Because I sort of look at it and I go, well, even if you think it may not have been the best way, has an outcome from that been really valuable? Has it actually created a different pathway that you can go down? Does it become something where you go, you know what, we'll steer away from the word wrong completely. We'll just use every instance or every experience as a learning experience where it might just lead us down another pathway?
Yes, you can get rid of the word wrong. I think you can get rid of the word wrong. Sometimes, and it's all in your language, isn't it? And how you use the language to different players, I guess.
Do you have different languages for varying players?
Yeah, you do. You do. Obviously, as I said, from being able to work with players of all abilities through the language, you do have to, it's the same message, but you have to deliver it differently. Because at the top level, you can use certain language. And when you're dealing with a person with intellectual disability, you have to not change, it's the same message, but just deliver differently. So you do have to change that language as you go, but the messaging is always the same. And I think that comes from your philosophy, your values, your beliefs, and then obviously what you think will help that player best in their progression in their cricket or whatever sport they're doing.
So what are the key values for you? You spoke about values.
Oh, for me, it's about honesty and the relationship with players. It's about being able to help players at the end of the day, whatever they require. I mean, as coaches, we're pretty privileged. They come to us with their hopes and dreams, and they ask us to try and help them out. And that's a privileged position to be in. They're sort of holding their hands out to you, saying, "I need some help to get you." So as a coach, we're very privileged in that way. But it's about developing that relationship with them. To me, it's people first, as I said to you, and then player second, because you can't. We people in general, and you just want to develop good people. So if they're a good person, Justin Lang always spoke about character over cover drives. A lot of people, the New Zealanders, I don't know if we can use this word, but they said no nasty people policy. I'll say it that way. And even Alex Ferguson, you'd say, I'd rather have him in the opposition for 2 games a year than have him in my side for the entire season. I have to see him every day. I don't want to deal with him. So sometimes we try and fit characters into our culture, whereas we shouldn't be trying to fit the character into them. We should have the character that fits into the culture and then develop their skills. So we don't work the other way around. Somebody could be very skillful, but is a bad apple. That makes it hard. Whereas if you've got someone who's got the right character in that side. So developing really good people is part of my philosophy, ensuring that you, within your own beliefs and just being honest with people, I think, and be good people. You just want to develop good people, and calling out bad behaviors. If someone does something, you've got to say something. You can't just, the standards you set are the standards you walk past. So you've got to be able to live up to your own values. And if you do, and you expect the players that you're working with are of the same, in that period that they're with you, what they do outside of that, well, you hope that it molds them in some way. But I think that would be mine.
Yeah, you know that saying, the standard you accept is the standard you walk past. For you, if you go into a team environment that you're not regularly a part of, what are the things you look for to determine what the culture is like? What are the behaviours that stand out to you to say this is a good culture or this is a poor culture?
Well, culture is a really interesting thing because it can be determined in multiple ways. So if I walked into a club, and I've done this before, and maybe rightly or wrongly again, but you walk into a club session where you're not a regular, but you can pick up straight away whether or not it's one of respect. Because when you sit down and you don't know somebody, you should at least give them the time of day. I'm fully with you that you've got to make an impression straight away. If you don't, well, you've lost that first 5 minutes of the day. But I think the important part is still, if they're messing around in the session, if they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, I call them up straight away as a group, even if I'm just a one-off type coach. And I just say to them, is this acceptable? We're all here to train, but 5 or 6 of you are disrupting it. You guys okay with that? And allowing them to then say, well, we're not okay with that because I'm not here to mess around. I'm here to train. And then they pull their heads in. But it's up to the players to be able to, as I said, in the teams that I have been working with, it was up to the players, not only me, who would call them out. We had a situation where players would say, hey, stop, pull your head in. We're not here to do this. And I didn't have to say a word. But that's something you develop over time and with a group. But when you're on your own, or one-off, I still don't let people get away with things like that. I'll still call them up and say, that's not the way we do it yet. When you do it in your normal sessions, that's up to you. But today, this is what we're going to do. But I think team culture is developed. We once spoke about team culture, and if I walked into a club and I'd never been there before, would someone greet me and say hello? If they don't, and everybody just wanders around, then I think you're getting an idea of what that club's about. If they come up to you and say, oh, haven't seen you before, how are you? Are you well? Yeah, this is who we are. Can we help you? All of a sudden, you've got that different approach, and I think that's where you want to get to.
And it seems to be that it's the little behaviours that make the biggest difference.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more, Jane. It's not about making big changes, and as I said, Chip, it's about people buying into what that team culture is. Remember that as a club, we shouldn't have to change our values and our beliefs every time we change a coach. The club itself has values and beliefs, and that should be throughout the whole thing. So if if I came into that team or a new player came into the team, they buy into that. If you don't, then I'm not sure that you're quite the right fit for that team. You can change things along the way. I think it's important to bring new things to the team, but as a club who's got a history, those values and beliefs are important.
The history is longer than your time there, so it's powerful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And just to finish off, when you look at yourself from when you first started coaching, as you said, childminding in 2003 of your son's team, and you worked your way through and you've got to this point now, when you are finishing up in your coaching career, what is going to be going through your head about how you've actually transferred yourself from that very first coach to what you end up? What's going to be the difference? What's going to be the biggest difference, do you think, between your starting attitude and your finishing attitude?
The attitude side of things is becoming a little bit more professional in what I did, obviously. Being able to deliver a program or assistance to players that has got meaningful change to their lives and to their game. But the most important thing is having made a difference to someone in the end of the day. So I'm sure when I hopefully get to an older age, I'll still be writing little coaching blogs or doing something. I'm not sure I'll be able to throw balls at that age, but there's always bowling machines. But again, it's just about having made a difference to someone's life. I think when you wake up in the morning, you want to get up because someone is asking you to help them out today. And if you can just do that in a small way or play a part in that person's journey, then I think you've done okay. So it's all about making sure that, when all is done and dusted, I'm hoping I made a difference in someone's lives.
Thanks for joining Paolo Franzoni and myself, Dwayne Nestor, on the Sporting Mindset Show. I hope today's conversation has given you something to think about. One thing we certainly know is that mindset matters. So as you move through your week, maybe take a moment to reflect. What mindset are you bringing into your sport, your coaching, your parenting, or your everyday life? If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe, share it with someone who'd benefit from it, and continue being part of a community that values growth, learning, and high performance done the right way. I'm Dwayne Nestor, and this has been the Sporting Mindset Show.